By that, I, of course, mean that, like Edra, I am a father to him. Of course, he told Osrith in his diplomatic tone. It is only right that a mother wishes to send her son somewhere in particular. If you wish to leave the coin, leave it. I do not ask for it. Osrith put it on the table near the bed. He did not grow angry. He didn't move at all. Then he asked, "When are you leaving?" And Osrith wondered whether it was his study of God at the monastery that had evened his temper, made him less prone to anger. For he had attacked her when she had departed with Edra to Shadowkin on his deathbed. Had it only been 20 years before? It felt like much longer ago. "Your son tells me you have faints, he told her. "Did he also tell you I stripped naked during one of those fits and murdered 2 West Saxon warriors?" Constantine's lip curled to one side. It was his favorite story to tell of his mother, particularly if he was cross with her about something. "He did. And while you have these, I would suggest the precaution of leaving for Berwick by ship." He crossed to the window which gave a good view of the Forth River. "Domhnall sails down the coast tomorrow, for patrol. Could you wait until then? I would have you safely back to your lands." Her lands, Osrith noticed. He could have said Sainid's lands or Finan's lands, but he chose to remind her they were her lands. And she wanted to ask about Brehon law, but Constantine would probably persuade her to seek counsel from Chaldees and the learned monks. It didn't matter. It was foolish thinking if she thought that she could claim the lands formerly known as Rusht. "Thank you," Osrith told him, "for being here." Constantine smiled. "You can come as you wish, you can stay as you wish," he told her. "This is your home, Osrith. How could it not be?" That was 2 people who she loved, who had known before she had what she was about to do. "It is very kind, it is." And then Constantine kissed her, pulled her to him, his lips pressing onto hers, holding her close to him. It was firm, and passionate, and it was only because it was Constantine broke away as quickly as he had begun that Osrith did not have time to object. Only a kiss, Osrith thought. The king of Alba stepped from her, no sign of impropriety. "I will look after your son," Constantine told her. "I swore I would from the day he was born. He does not need to be a warrior if he does not wish to be. And I do not need your silver." Ragnall's silver, Osrith thought. "He needs to be able to defend himself, and others," Osrith told Constantine. With the breaking of the union with Strathclyde, and Owain's arrangements with Edward, she shook her head. "With possible renewal of arrangements with whoever holds power south, there may be conflict on your eastern border." And then, Osrith thought, what would she do, if she ruled the ancient lands? "Ha," Constantine told her. "There is no eastern border, there never was. Ask one person where Owain's lands end and mine begin and you will get a different answer to another and another. You have a different strategy." Osrith guessed. "I send men, diplomats, to remind the Strathclydians that they have more in common with the Gaels and the Picts than the Saxons to their south." A campaign of hearts, Osrith thought. And if what Edra had told her was true, the campaign was into her land. A third thought realized that Constantine's daughter, his adopted daughter, had chosen the same method her father had for dealing with the Strathclydians. "I wish I would be here to go with whoever you send." "I will send people like young Finan, Osrith," he told her, "to remind them of the culture we all share." "If he wishes to go, I'm not asking. I'm saying," Osrith told him, "as long as he can wield a sword in defense, then I will be happy." And Osrith was not surprised when her son was not disappointed not to go back to Berwick. A little sad. He was 13 now, and she had barely spent any time with him. She held the side of her head as one of her headaches flashed across the side of her head. "Mater," young Finan cried. He had seen how sometimes she blacked out, fell when a pain in her head occurred. "Edra!" He cried again, calling to his sister who had been on her way to the boats to take her to Chaldees. They happened less often now, but were no less debilitating. For the sake of her children, who were fussing over her as if she were a girl with a sprained ankle, she conceded to wait another day, not least so that to young Finan could say goodbye to Caldegar and Bean. "Will you visit soon?" he asked, and Osrith knew the question was for them rather than her. Her warriors looked to Osrith. "Yes, she answered, "We can come north again." "And you to Beric?" It was then she saw his face fall. "Must I?" he asked. "Kaltigar trains my warriors," Osrith prompted, her heart sinking. What was so awful for him at Beric that he did not want to come to visit her? Or what was so attractive at Dunnottar? What dash? But she saw young Finan look past her, and she turned to see a face she loved. "My cousin says you wish to sail when we go out tomorrow?" "Yes," Osrith told him. "I am surprised to see you here, so close to harvest," he told her. "Not as surprised as I was to be coming here." And Osrith told him about Bué, laid as a challenge from old over her chair. "The Morrigan does things like that," Domhnall told her. Somehow she did not think it was the Morrigan. But then, not Finan, who did not want her ever to set foot on a battlefield again, or anyone on her estate. "Where do you wish to go to?" Domhnall asked. "And I must warn you, there is a lot of hostile craft in the sea. Frisian, West Saxon, Norse, Dane. I would be grateful if you would take us to my harbour," she told Domhnall, and explained that young Finan was to remain at Dunnottar, but her 2 men would accompany her. Hostile craft were nothing to things she had faced before. Heston accosting Ulfanthgert while they took her to Hampton had been worse. And she has had one of her fits, young Finan told him, before Osrith could stop him. A look of concern passed over Domhnall's face. "You will take no part in any hostilities either," he told her, looking as if he would have argument if Osrith began one. And that was it. In the morning, with prompt farewells, Osrith got into the Trinity and was rowed down the Forth. 88,888,888. A hot day was replaced by a cold night as Domhnall led his fleet to the mouth of the estuary. It was sheltered there, and all could rest. Osrith sat at the stern of the ship and, after a few bites of bread, she pulled the fleece to her body, thinking about the parchment that Edra had given to her. "May I join you?" Domhnall, USG jar in hand, stood before Osrith. She was too tired to refuse, and besides, he was her friend, and she wanted to talk to him, like they used to, about everything and nothing. But Domhnall clearly had a different agenda. "Tell me what is troubling you," he asked her, offering Osrith the jar. She normally did not drink, but stuck out a hand this time. "Just a couple of sips." And she told her friend about young Finan, and her concerns she had about the time he had been at Wittenberg. "You tried, no one could fault you for that." "But what?" Osrith asked, truly lost. "It is widely believed young Finan is Constantine's," he confided. "I am sorry to say it, but the rumour has been hard to eradicate." Osrith sighed, passing him back the jar. "I wonder if Finan has heard it," she murmured. "I do not believe Finan knew I can chop our wood with a problem." And she thought, would he be cruel like that? Of course he would. He had 4 years of opportunities to treat her son badly. "You took him home, Osrith," Domhnall said. And Osrith sat closer to her friend, and looked up to the stars, tracing patterns with her finger. Was that really true, what Edra had told her? She pictured her mother, and thought of the rhymes she had taught her. Yantan tethra methra ... pump, sethra hethra hothra nuthra dick. Yan dick, dan dick, tethra dick methra dick bumfit ... yan bumfit, dan bumfit, tethra bumfit, methra bumfit, jiggot. And there was another ... aorn cant, door cant, try ... aorn cant, door cant try, dwa. She shuffled more upright, the fleece falling from her lap. But she didn't notice ... counting to 20 in sheep, all the way up to 50. Was that her 50 heights? And 100, 200, 3, 100, 203, for you. Osrith sat up. Did her mother know? Had she been trying to tell her in rhyme, as she spoke to her daughter softly at bedtime? Elfric had forbidden Jitha from even acknowledging Osrith. Edra, as she had been baptized, was she teaching Osrith her birthright? What? He asked. And Osrith asked whether he knew about Brehon law. And when Domhnall asked why, giving her back the fleece that had fallen, she told him Edra's idea. "My queen," Domhnall told her, and Osrith smiled, allowing him to put his arm around her. "It is more than possible, this is Brehon law." "Exactly," and Britons as well as Gaels followed it. The Druid were the class who oversaw the law. White robes, mistletoe leaf tea. You may laugh, but they were the priests of their time. They practiced medicine, dispensed justice, were the Eliachites. And Osrith thought how good she felt, being with her friend. The only person who ever told her the truth, unalloyed, unbiased. Domhnall always made her feel better. She glanced to the prow of the ship. Both Caltigar and Bean were dozing now. Then she thought of something that she wondered whether Domhnall had heard. Did you know that Ealasaid's grandchildren were really Ragnar and Gisela, son and daughter of Sigtryggr and Stjora? She asked him. My niece's children. It was the very last thing she had found out about, and how Angus brought them back from Eothwick. Domhnall nodded, and pushed but then said, No, I did not hear that at all. Nefor then put a finger to her mouth and winked. If she was honest, it was for the best. It also meant Constantine had a claimant for Eothwick's throne and, by extension, Northumbria. And 2 days later, untroubled at sea, they landed at the harbour south of the Two-Eyed, and Domhnall walked with Osrith to her farm hall. I hope your watch on the sea is as uneventful as our journey here, Osrith told him, and allowed Domhnall to kiss her on the cheek before the hall's door. Will you not come in for refreshment? Osrith asked. But her friend shook his head. Thank you. No, Osrith, he replied. I do not want to miss the tide. And she watched him leave, and take the rowing boat back to the Trinity. Finan was at the hall when Osrith returned. She bade Caltigar and Bean to come to eat at the table. Rhea was delighted to see her husband, and while she was eating her bread, he sat beside her. Can you understand how worried I was, coming back and finding out you had ridden off with young Finan? Caltigar, Bean, please take your food to the armory, Osrith told them, which, if she had been in a different position, she would have been pleased that they now had. And, when they had gone, told Finan how she had been challenged to leave to war, and reasoned that her war was north. Why was he here? The Uineal scum. Finan thrust his arm towards the sea. But Osrith had questions of her own. She stood up, and took the boiled water she was drinking and tipped it into the fireplace, making the wood fire sizzle. Why did young Finan not learn as he should have, with you and Utad? What? Finan asked, and they stopped, inhaling deeply. I am pleased to see you, he added. Then crossed the floor and took Osrith in his arms. And the last few weeks faded to nothing because her husband's lips were on hers and he wrapped his arms tighter around her. Then he broke off and put his mouth to her ear. When I saw you gone, when I knew you had gone north, to Alba, Finan told her, I thought I had lost you. Lost me? Osrith asked, pulling back and looking at Finan. You surely do not mean that? But you are here, you are home, Finan went on. Perhaps I stay away too long, perhaps I cannot sew or cook or embroider or do all of those things a wife should. Osrith told him, that you stay away so long? Finan looked at her, confused. What I do is fight, and negotiate with my neighbors, Osrith told him. I don't know what happened at Bibbenberg, but I have left our son at Dunotter to continue his training. And as for Domhnall, I never want you to see that shit again, nor the Alba bastard king, Finan told her, forcefully. I thought he could never control you now. And as for sewing, Osrith stepped back, arms folded. Yet I tolerate you living under the same roof as Eadith, she interrupted, 1 week out of 3, to my reckoning. Eadith is my friend, and your brother's wife, Finan pointed out. And Domhnall is mine, and with more reason to be so. Perhaps if you wish to choose my friends Finan of the Ullaid, you should be with me more often. Osrith, he exclaimed, then said nothing for a moment. When I married you, do you think for one moment that I did not know I was marrying him, too? And Constantine? You behave as if they were your family. They are my family, insofar as they are welcoming and loyal and care for my well-being. Utad is your family, Finan told her. You put your life on the line to tell him that when you fought for him at Bibbenberg. And when have you even once visited? Visited? Osrith repeated. Is that what he needed? Is that what you need? A dutiful wife who visits and can sew and darn and embroider and welcome kin and be hospitable? She turned away. Because I cannot be any of those things, but I can fight, I can manage our land. And then turned back, resentful. because she hated it when Fine and Rod were away. And maybe after all I could have made a better job of teaching young Finan the sword. Finan, what happened? He is your son. Yours. I have done many distasteful things to keep him somewhere safe all of his life. A clash of personalities, Finan said. They did not get on, Utad, and young Finan. And you let him stay all that time? He would not leave, Finan told her. He said he would be disappointing you. Osrith, Finan persisted, he is no warrior, and you want to make him one. And there was a lot of pressure for him to learn. He is as Eliached, and relief flooded Osrith, who could accept anything as long as Finan accepted his son. And you are not disappointed? No, Finan told her. It is an honor to be a storyteller. It has power. He was blessed coming into this world. I just wish I had been there when he arrived. And he stepped to Osrith again and took her once more in his arms. Will you come, just once, to Bibbenberg? Osrith asked. If the Lord invites me. And I will not see Domhnall again if it pleases you. You will, Finan told her. Just remember me, sometimes. I remember you always, Finan Moore. I remember lying guarding Edward's door thinking of your face as you charmed the breeches off the Saxon who thought you were going to kill him over faulty clay pots. How could I not have loved you, you who made me laugh when my days were grey? And the Lord and the Lady of Berwick kissed one another as if they were the last two humans on earth, the Lord bringing the lady into his arms and carrying her up to their room. After they had reunited in their own bed several times, Finan traced a finger down her body, before kissing her again. Come, to Bibbenberg, he told her. I will tell Utad you are waiting on an invitation. When are you going? Osrith asked, because Finan always spoke of Bibbenberg before he left for it. And she felt the distant ghost of annoyance because she had finally admitted that she felt resentful that Edith saw far too much of her husband. It was not resentment. Let her admit to herself that it was the distasteful emotion of envy. Down the coast, Finan told her, Ethelhelm's ships are making a play for Dominaton of Northumbria. They have Wessex support and if they can get Northumbria it only takes Mercia to yield. He hopes to revive the freed of any order pro-independence in Mercia. Are there any? Osrith asked, because they would be fools to support Ethel if they truly want independence. There is also the Queen. She is in danger, as are Edward's two sons. They have fled into hiding. And Osrith kissed her husband, the deepest and most emotional kiss that she had ever shared with him. I do not have to go until tomorrow, or the next day, even. In the morning. I understand, Osrith told him, answering his unspoken statement that would have involved the words, you know I swore an oath. I understand too, Finan told her, that you Aineel bastard will always be in your life. And the King of Alba. Just don't tell me that I have to like it. And he stroked her hair, which had lengthened to her shoulder in 4 years. So she was content. 2 days later, when she watched her husband ride out beyond their borders, following the coast round past Lindisfarne and beyond, to the imposing fortress of Bibbenberg, and when she was sure Utad and his men would have left, and gone wherever it was that he had taken them, that was when she headed south. 88,888,888. Osrith. The surprise in the voice of the Lady of Bibbenberg was genuine as Osrith walked in through the western land gate. It was a mistake, Osrith knew. But, she was the Lady of Berwick, and neighbors had to be neighbors. Please, come with me, to the hall, she told Osrith, and blinked a few times when Osrith followed with learned familiarity, not as a guest, but as returning kin. She asked for ale and for bread, and Edith sat with Osrith at the table over which Osrith had threatened Wiher when the West Saxons and Mersons had been besieging it, where she and Wiher had say years before that, when she had been reconciled with him, where she had once sat, in a corner, watching her uncle Elfric host one lord or another, where she had looked out to sea. Osrith glanced now. Had the vista been north, she might have seen something unfolding that would have made her flee Bibbenberg, flee to help the stricken. I remember you at Aylesbury, she told Osrith, brightly. Eardwulf, she faltered. Eardwulf had let me collect flowers in the garden. And I saw you. I am sorry I killed him, Osrith told her politely. I am sorry to say I am not sorry, Edith told her. He murdered Ethelred under it all. I liked the Lord of Mercia, sometimes. And how is everything? Osrith asked, noticing the sun had inched diagonally up the sky. Not far enough yet to excuse herself, else be seen as rude. I get on with my work. People from the villages come and I help them where I can. And she told Osrith of her sorrow that they had not been blessed with a child. He is angry with me now. There is a lot of unrest, the death of the King of Wessex, and I told him I wanted him to be safe. Osrith smiled, then saw that Edith was giving her a strange look. She thought Osrith was mocking her. It is funny, Finan said the same to me, she explained. Do you think we are safe here? Edith asked, suddenly. There have been a lot of raids along the coast. She saw Osrith's face. As you know, Ethelm's ships, Osrith told her. They had seen half a dozen waving his banner just on the journey from the Forth to Berwick. Uthed spent all his life trying to get this fortress back, and it took Mersons and West Saxons and Scots and me all helping him. Osrith told Edith, I think these walls will be safe for you and Uthed and his men. And Edith got her tone, and leaned towards Osrith. Eyes widened. Finan was very kind to me once, she told Osrith. We travelled to Cymru, and I was treating Uthed. The blade ice spite had pierced him, from to Tenholg. I wanted to cure him, I needed to, with all my skill. Finan took me to one side, I remember, Osrith thought, and told me I could do it. I had the skill. It made all the difference to know he believed in me when I did not believe in myself. Edith inhaled, as did Osrith. It made it no better, though he came home to Osrith regularly enough, to her bed. But she was also realistic. Finan was a man, and men had their desires. She would accept Edith's word, of course. But she did not trust the woman, and she would not now ask what had happened with young Finan. It was irrelevant now. She and Finan were united in their acceptance of his training in Alba. Osrith withdrew her chair suddenly, and got to her feet. I am sorry, with whatever has made you stay away from here all this time, Edith told Osrith. I only hope we can resolve to be better neighbors. Better neighbors, Osrith thought, bitterly. And I bet she sewed her own embroidery, and could knit and cook, and do all those things that a wife should do. He is angry with me, Edith told Osrith. So very angry when I asked him to be at home. I help the poor, but I can still feel his anger. And Osrith felt suddenly very sorry for this woman, who her brother had seduced away from her land and the people she knew, to a rocky, isolated fortress. McCord, Osrith told her. That's what the Britons called Lindisfarne. It was a great island renowned for its healing. Perhaps it is somewhere you should visit, with your skill as a healer. And Edith gave her a warm smile, like the ones she used to give Osrith when she was a child, and Osrith gave her a touch to her arm, which made the woman smile more. But she still didn't like Finan being in her company even a little bit. Please, Osrith told her. You are welcome to come to Berwick. Please visit, and your lord. You are very kind, Edith was in the process of saying, when a servant tore into Bibbenberg's hall with an urgent message. A ship had been broken up and survivors were on the way. 88,888,888. Are you sure? Finan, I know your eyesight is impeccable, but are you sure? They are going south, Lord Uthed, and they don't seem to be returning. Uthed inhaled. What was the King of Alba doing now, he wondered. Those who were returning were battered and crushed, having engaged some or other of their enemy. They had not ridden far to keep watch on the coast. Back up north with the Farne Islands in sight, Uthed had taken Hayard with them. The man had proved to be surprisingly durable, having served Elfric and then Weir. When they come back, they are always ravaged. Some have been wrecked, off Lindisfarne. Yes? Finan asked. Then they walk back to Alba. Finan laughed. He liked the idea of Domhnall Uineal having to walk back to his cousin in ignominy. And if they pitch up at Berwick, what will my sister do? He asked Finan, his eyes gleaming at his own mischief. See it as her Christian duty to care for the shipwrecked. Send word to you in case you wanted to share the duty to your fellow man. They watched the sea again, watched the seabirds following a shoal of herring off the coast, cackling loudly. What if Constantine invades? Uthed asked Finan. Or, when do you think? Not yet. He's fighting Owain of Strathclyde over a broken oath. Uhtred grinned. Marrying my sister has its uses then, he told his friend. You are ideally placed for news. But then there was no more talking, for, on the horizon, a ship was in trouble. Two Norse ships had surrounded it, their striped sails clearly contrasting on this summer's day. They are failing, Lord. Finan called urgently to Uhtred. The boats. But Uhtred put a staying hand on his friend's arm. Not yet. Finan looked out to sea again. They would be terrified, the crew, fighting, knowing that one slip and they would be in and drowned. Uhtred. Finan called again. But his friend pointed out to sea. What do we do? Watch, and wait. You can't mean, you should be able to see that. If I can. Uhtred interrupted. And when Finan looked, he could just about make out a white banner, with a red hand upon it. The ship was the Trinity. You hate that man who is sailing that ship. And it could be like this, Finan thought. They could say they could not launch quickly enough, the current's too strong to reach them. Oh, they got in as many from the sea as they could, but the tide was going out, and the Norse were turning on them. Domhnall. He hadn't seen Domhnall. And he was sorry that he was gone, and pleased, so pleased that he had been Osrith's friend. It will crush my wife if she found out we let it founder, Finan managed. Uhtred gave his friend a look, knowing that he was right. Hayard, get to the rowing boats. He called. Sihtric, get the first one out. Osferth the other. One thing that was true, that the sea was indeed rough. As they pulled the oars the waves drenched them. In Yerget, Finan said, as he pulled a sailor into the boat. And you, he said to another. In all, they rescued 13. He hoped he might not see Domhnall, but as they retreated, he saw that, with his standard in hand, Domhnall Uineel looked back to his ship, being broken to pieces by the Norse. It was only when they got to the beach that he looked up to their saviors. All of his men had been saved, he realized, when he saw two pulling themselves up onto the beach. Lord Uhtred, Domhnall said, I am grateful that you saved the lives of my men, and my own. Lord Domhnall, Uhtred told him, you are a long way from your own coast. And he gestured towards the horses on the higher ground, which Berg was guarding. Can you ride? I am sure we can, Domhnall told Uhtred, his long wet hair whipping his face, and making eye contact with Finan. King Constantine will. King Constantine? Uhtred interrupted. I am sorry, I think you misunderstand. You are not going back to Alba. He looked south, to his fortress. You're coming with us, as guests, to Bibbenberg.